Howdy gang. Today's video is about one of the greatest RPGs from the 2000s, a game that helped its developer break into the mainstream in the West, and ultimately would pave the way for them to save themselves from the brink of death. Atlus released Shin Megami Tensei Persona 3 on PlayStation 2 from mid-2006 to early 2008 depending on the region. It was a major shift in the series as it would introduce the series' signature combination of high school life simulation and monster collecting dungeon crawling. Over the course of a school year, players get to make friends with all sorts of troubled and interesting people, and confront the ultimate inevitability of life. To live is to die. An updated version, Persona 3 FES, released on PS2 from early 2007 to late 2008 depending on the region. Atlus would later update Persona 3 yet again, with a new version for PSP, called Persona 3 Portable. It would release throughout late 2009 to early 2011. Then 12 years later, an HD release for Switch, PS4, Xbox One, Series X, and PC would happen. But wait, there's more! Atlus also has a remake called Persona 3 Reload, set for worldwide release on February 2nd, 2024. With so many different versions, many potential Persona 3 players ask the question, which version of Persona 3 is the best? Well, I'm not trying to answer that question in this video. I just bring it up because the version debate is always an elephant in the room for Persona 3. Persona 3 is kind of a problem game when it comes to Atlus's updated re-releases. Neither updated version seems to really be the best one, and Reload being a remake just further exacerbates this issue. For this video, I'm reviewing the 2023 HD release of Persona 3 Portable, and while I will occasionally compare it to FES because I have experience with both, I'm primarily focused on Portable. Is Persona 3 Portable worth checking out? Well, to find out, we're going to have to take a look at the game, and that includes a lot of discussion of potential spoilers. So, this is your warning now. There will be spoilers. With that said, let's take a look. Persona 3 Portable offers two routes to play through. You can play as either the original male protagonist from the PS2 game, or as an exclusive female protagonist. They share the same basic story, but they have different personalities, different characters to befriend, and have some aesthetic differences like music and HUD color. For anybody asking about the answer, which is the extra content from FES, nope, it's not here. I chose to play through the female route because as an exclusive extra route, it's arguably the whole selling point of this game. You are a student who is newly transferred to Gekkoukan High School. Arriving late, you see streets lined with coffins and other strange things on your way to your new dorm. Upon arriving, you meet a strange boy who asks you to name your character, I mean sign a contract, and you meet a couple of the girls who live at the dorm. Yukari seems concerned about what you experienced out there, while Mitsuru doesn't say anything about it. Yukari apparently carries a fake gun for self-defense, but we'll learn more about that later. It's time to go to bed. The next day, you start school and meet Junpei, another resident of your dorm, who mentions that you can join a club, and the next night, you meet Ikutsuki, the chairman of the board for your school. As you sleep that night, you're being watched by Ikutsuki, Mitsuru, and Yukari. Their conversation reveals that the odd phenomenon you experienced is something called the Dark Hour, a hidden hour that happens every day at midnight. During this time, normal people turn into coffins, but you have the potential, whatever that means, so you're special. But you're asleep, so technically you wouldn't know that. Meanwhile, in your dreams, you meet an odd gentleman named Igor who reminds you of your contract to be the main character. You have a year, and it's up to you not to screw everything up. Igor will be providing you his services throughout, but we'll get back to him later. The Dark Hour passes uneventfully, but the next night is anything but uneventful. One of the other residents of your dorm, an older student named Akihiko, encounters a monster known as a shadow. The shadow is heading towards the dorm, and Yukari takes you to the roof. The shadow climbs up, and Yukari pulls out her fake gun. She needs to fight, but it doesn't work out. Not because she's using a fake gun, but because that fake gun is something called an evoker that allows a user to summon up their potential and defend themselves in battle. Yukari's having some trouble, so you grab it and give it a try. By accepting the inevitability of your own death, you manage to summon your potential made manifest, a persona.
Now we get to fight something!
Since this is just the tutorial fight, we don't really get to do much here, so we'll go deeper into the details of combat later. You save the day. It's almost like you're the main character or something. Afterwards, you collapse. Back in your dreams, you find yourself back with Igor. He explains that a persona, much like the psychological concept, is a mask that helps someone get through life. Your powers will grow as you develop bonds with people. These are called social links, which give bonus experience to the new personas you'll be fusing throughout the game. While you're in Igor's velvet room, you'll be able to fuse new personas. You'll have plenty of time to mess with things to see how it works. You awaken in the hospital, and you have a heart-to-heart with Yukari about your background and about how her father died. Now you're going back to school. Your first visit to Tartarus is coming up soon, and the gameplay loop is about to start, so let's get into it. It's up to you to balance school, life, and Tartarus. When you're not killing monsters, you're just a normal high school kid. You have some social stats that you're going to want to work on: academics, charm, and courage. These are important for your social links, where you form a bond with certain characters in order to get bonuses for fusing new personas. Basically, every persona is associated with a certain arcana. For example, your starting persona Orpheus is associated with the Fool arcana. Each social link is also associated with an arcana, so leveling up a social link gives bonus XP to any new personas you fuse of that arcana, allowing you to get huge power boosts. Social links each have 10 levels, so you're going to have to commit a bit of time to building up your relationships. But you unlock the ability to fuse the ultimate persona of that link's arcana in addition to the XP bonuses, so completing one is worth it. I wasn't kidding around about those social stats either. You better level them up. A few characters absolutely refuse to associate with you unless you get those stats up to maximum. Sorry, I don't have a degree in theoretical physics.
I said I had a theoretical degree in physics.
Since you're a student, you go to school 6 days out of the week. Sometimes you'll have to answer one of your teacher's questions, and if you don't screw it up, your charm will increase. Since you have exams at the end of each term, you might want to pay attention. Just like in real school. Or you could just cheat. Just like in real school. At other times, you get to choose between sleeping through a class to improve your condition, or staying awake for an academics boost. After school and on Sundays, you can do stuff in your free time all around town. You can hang out with people, join a school club, work towards leveling up one of your social stats, work a part-time job for money and possible social stat increases, and so on. At night, you can do some stuff as well, but you're limited to only your dorm and Polonium Mall. You can also go to Tartarus at night. But you can't just do whatever you want whenever you want. Like real life, people have schedules. Most actions cause time to progress. Some events can't be accessed after a certain point. Remember, time is of the essence. If there's anything I could criticize about the social sim aspect, it's that I found myself often having nothing to do in the late game. You can't start certain social links unless one of your social stats is maxed out. Because I didn't play ideally, I was barely able to work on Mitsuru's social link, and I couldn't do much of Ken's either. At night, there's only a small amount of social links available, or you can do stuff to increase social stats. For story reasons, a character named Shinjiro only has a limited time before his social link becomes permanently unavailable, and I didn't get it done in time. Eventually, I completed all of the nighttime social links that I could do, but Ken's isn't available that often, even though you see him every single night in the dorm. Since I'd leveled up all my social stats, I could either work part-time for a pitiful amount of money, or do nothing and go to sleep. During the day, this problem isn't quite as bad because there's a lot more to do, but after a point, I basically completed a bunch of social links while failing to do others for various reasons, and, well, essentially, I had stuff I could do, but no time to do it. So once I hit the endgame, the options that were actually available weren't worth doing. One of the party members, a robot named Aegis, only allows you to start her social link in January, so trying to prioritize that further left me unable to get some other stuff done. At the end of the game, even though I had social links I hadn't completed, I didn't have the chance to anymore. The late game ends up being a bit of a dry spell for content. Before we get to the dungeon and combat stuff, I want to talk about some of the other stuff you can do in town. Paulownia Mall has a bunch of shops. The pharmacy has discounts on Saturdays, and they sell all your items you'll want for healing, reviving, and so on. There's an antique store where you can fuse weapons that you obtain from Golden Shadows and Tartarus with one of your personas to get some powerful effects. They also sell cards that can increase your persona's stats, and new to Portable, you can also buy skill cards there to teach specific skills to your personas. Since skill inheritance in fusions is random, you're probably going to want these. Skill cards can also be brought to the shrine to be duplicated. They'll be gone for a few days, but then you'll get 2 of them back. However, this guy's random about what card he'll duplicate for you, so expect to spend some time re-rolling until he picks the one you want. At least you don't actually have to commit until he picks one you want, but it seems a little silly to add the cards to make the randomization a little less annoying, only to make one of the best ways to obtain extra cards random and annoying, but whatever. Anyway, there's also the police station at the mall, where you can buy weapons and armor. In the PS2 games, there was another store next to it that sold accessories, but in Portable they changed that so you could pay to improve your condition there, and move the accessories to the police station. Finally, there are requests. These vary from activities done out in the world, specific fusion requests, and items to fetch in Tartarus. These can give decent rewards, but you could just ignore them. They are side quests after all. I think my favorite part of these is hanging out with your Velvet Room assistant, in my case, Elizabeth. It's great that she gets to be fleshed out as a character, and I find it more fun to watch her act like a fish out of water in the real world than I do to grind through Tartarus hoping I'll encounter some random rare enemy because she wants the loot it drops. A lot of those parts are a pain in the ass. And speaking of Tartarus, at nighttime, you can go into Tartarus. This is the dungeon, by the way. Not a dungeon, the dungeon. Tartarus is what GeckoCon High School turns into during the dark hour. It's up to you to climb up to the top, 1 floor at a time. Floors have monsters and loot and are randomly generated. You see the shadows on the floor and can choose to avoid or attack them. A surprisingly modern take on random encounters. You can occasionally find golden shadows. Killing these gives you the weapons you need for fusing at the antique store. Every few floors, you'll encounter some kind of boss shadow. Luckily, each floor with a boss fight has a teleporter, so you can go back to the entrance first. At the entrance, you can heal, save your game, go to the Velvet Room for fusions, or leave for the night. Eventually, after fighting through a number of these bosses, you'll hit a wall, and you won't be able to go any further until the next story event. Every full moon, you'll have a story event, and you'll have to fight some boss shadow. If you were able to beat all the bosses you could reach in Tartarus up to that point, you should be fine. Afterwards, you'll get a call explaining that the way is cleared, and you can go further in Tartarus. Tartarus itself is, well, it's a dungeon. It gets the job done, but it's really repetitive. You're only ever in this one dungeon for the entire game, and while it does look different in its various blocks, it's still just a basic randomly generated dungeon. There's no puzzles or anything interesting like hidden rooms or shortcuts or anything like that. Just the same basic setup the whole time. It's functional, but that's not saying much. You can split your party up to have them look for the stairs, and that saves a lot of time, but it's disappointing that the one dungeon in the game is so dull that there's a convenient mechanic to skip playing through the dungeon. Shouldn't getting to crawl through a dungeon be one of the highlights of an SMT game? Tartarus does fit the game's theme of death and all that. Tartarus was a place in the underworld of Hades in Greek mythology, specifically where Zeus confined the Titans. Not those Titans. Anyway, we'll look more at that in the story chapter. Partway through the game, you'll start receiving phone calls telling you that someone has become trapped in Tartarus. There are a few of these every month. Technically, you could delay going to Tartarus until this happens, allowing you to do all your dungeon crawling and this side quest in a single day. But I'm an idiot with bad time management skills, so I didn't do that. Didn't you see the social sim chapter? Anyway, after you rescue these people, you can go talk to the cop at the police station and he'll give you rewards from them, like skill cards and stuff. So it's pretty useful. I will say I wish that more of these people were important. Only once or twice is it somebody for a social link, other times they're just random people. Could you guys have at least made it so these people matter outside of this one part of the game? As far as playing through Tartarus, it's repetitive, and honestly, it's always bothered me a little bit. Even with saving people and doing requests, it's still just running around floors that mostly look the same, hoping to find the stairs, someone to rescue, or that annoyingly rare monster that Elizabeth just has to get the loot from. They try to do stuff to make it feel like it's part of the world, but some people get trapped in here who don't matter and have no importance in the gameplay or story. Most of the story doesn't take place here. When it does, it's only for brief bits. It's just kind of there. It's obligatory. It's the, this is the JRPG and we need a dungeon. But I digress. In the PS2 releases, your characters would become tired as they went through Tartarus, eventually causing them to leave without any input from you. I appreciate that this emphasizes that they're not your puppets, they're people with their own concerns. But gameplay-wise, I don't like having my team bail out on me. Considering I spent most of my playthrough in Portable with Akihiko, Mitsuru, and Yukari, if Portable still did this, I'd be in for a world of hurt. Keep going with my underleveled characters, or give up the ghost for the night and try again later. What a fun choice. But that is just my preference, and I appreciate that that was a way for the original PS2 versions to try to force you out of your comfort zone. It's not a bad design, just not my preference. P3P streamlined a lot of stuff about Tartarus and Combat. There's no more getting tired inside Tartarus. Now you can resume exploring Tartarus from the last floor you were on instead of only starting from one of the teleporter floors. A trade-off for these changes is that healing at the entrance isn't free anymore. Combat also has a lot of tweaks, but before I can go into those tweaks, I'll first have to look at combat in general. When you see an enemy inside Tartarus, you can attack them to enter combat. If you can hit them first, you'll get the first move, but if they hit you first, they get the first move. Each turn, a participant can attack, block, use a move, or use an item. Physical moves cost HP, and magical moves cost SP. The main character has the Wild Card ability, allowing them to use a wide variety of personas, while the other party members only have access to a single persona. As the game progresses, their personas can evolve. For example, Akihiko's original persona Polydeuces gets replaced by Caesar as the game proceeds. Physical attacks can deal slash, strike, or pierce damage, while magical attacks can deal wind, fire, ice, or electric damage. Additionally, there's Bless and Curse magic, which are exclusively insta-kills, but I don't really like those because they're all or nothing. You kill the enemy, or you don't. Also, bosses are immune to them. Finally, there's Almighty, which you really can't do anything about. Each party member has types that they're strong or weak against, and so do enemies. In your case, your currently equipped persona determines what your strengths and weaknesses are, so you'll want to make sure to keep a well-rounded stock available. What makes this game so fun is the one more system. If someone gets hit with a damage type that they're weak to, they'll be knocked down. Whoever hit them gets a one more. Extra turns are fun, right? If you can knock down every enemy, then you can do an all-out attack, where all your party members who aren't knocked down or unconscious can do, well, an all-out attack on all enemies, dealing big almighty damage. Even bosses can get hit with these, and nothing resists, repels, drains, or blocks almighty damage. Just remember, enemies can't do all-out attacks, but all that other stuff also applies to you. Now it's time to look at how P3P introduced a lot of streamlining to Persona 3's combat. In the PS2 versions, in order to get a one more, everyone who gets hit by something needs to be knocked down. If you miss even just one enemy, or even just one of them isn't weak to that attack, you don't get the one more. That combined with multi-target attacks being less accurate makes choosing between single-target and multi-target attacks into a serious tactical consideration, which is interesting and good design. For Portable, they simplified it so even if you only knock down one enemy, you would still get the one more. Is this making it too simple, or just making it more convenient? On the one hand, having to knock every single enemy down with a multi-target attack is interesting as a tactical thing, but on the other hand, I feel like multi-target attacks being less accurate is good enough on making it something you have to think about. On another note, in the PS2 versions, you can skip your turn by waiting. Nothing happens, you're just standing there. In Portable, they changed this to guard, allowing you to block so that a big attack will deal less damage to you. If the attack would knock someone down but they're blocking, instead it doesn't. So blocking can stop the enemy from getting one-mores. I can go either way on this. PS2 versions of this game didn't have guard, but from vanilla Persona 4 on PS2, guard has been a series standard. But the real elephant in the room here is how you order your characters around. In basically every RPG, you control your party directly. In the PS2 releases of Persona 3, you don't. You control the protagonist directly, but your teammates are AI controlled. I guess this helps emphasize that these aren't just anime drawings on a TV screen, but rather they're people, and you can't boss people around like that. You can use the tactics menu to try to direct the AIs to do what you want, and it is actually a fairly robust system, but it does have its issues. For starters, even with the directions you can give, it's still basically RNG, and all you're really doing is slightly changing what that RNG will prioritize. Also, you can't change your tactics after you set it up on your turn. Finally, the AIs can be stubborn, like Yukari won't want to use her full party heals a lot of the time. And who seriously thought Mitsuru should have Marin Karen? In what universe would I ever want her to try to charm an enemy instead of using her ice magic, or her physical attack, or healing, or using her mind charge buff? I'll be honest with you. Persona 3 Fest was my intro to the series, and I've loved the Persona series to death ever since, but I've never been a fan of the tactics system. I'm not even necessarily opposed to having automation or AI control in an RPG. Final Fantasy XII's Gambit system is a great example of this being used really well, with a lot of complex options available. But then, FF12 is going for an MMO real-time computer RPG sort of thing with its combat, and the Gambit system helps you manage everything much more efficiently. In Persona 3, with this basic turn-based combat system, I really think they should have just let you control the characters directly the whole time. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, you know? Persona never went back to this. Persona 4 went with direct control, and it's been that way ever since. Even when Atlus ported Persona 3 to the PSP, Portable opted to go with direct control. While this is my preference, this does create some problems for this version of the game. For all the annoyances of the tactics menu, Persona 3 was originally designed with the tactics menu in mind to try to create a fair challenge. When you can have Mitsuru use Mind Charge to double her next magic attack's damage when you want to use it, and you can have Akihiko apply his debuffs to enemies reliably, and you can have Yukari cast her heals exactly the way you need her to, Persona 3's original design becomes a joke. It hardly poses much of a threat or a challenge to you. Normally the direct control would be fine, but again, Atlus didn't design Persona 3 with that in mind. And then they didn't rebalance this game, so the updated Persona 3 is a total joke as far as challenge is concerned. Hopefully Persona 3 Reload learned some lessons from all this. Now to try to wrap up the section on Tartarus and Combat, I'm going to try to be brief, but I should cover shuffle time and fusing new personas. There's a random chance that after every battle that you win, there will be something called shuffle time. It's guaranteed to happen if the main character gets the last hit or if an all-out attack is used to win. You could just not play shuffle time, but unless all the cards suck, there's really no reason not to, so you might as well do it. The cards available can give you anything from XP, yen, new personas, and so on. If you pick a card with a skull on it, Death will draw near. Death is an optional boss, but he's pretty easy to avoid, so you really don't need to worry about him that much, but still. Shuffle time's an interesting way for the game to give you rewards after battle, but I don't like how you have to get a card from shuffle time to get money. I feel like it ought to just be guaranteed like in most RPGs, but what can you do? More than that though, I really don't like how you get new personas from this minigame. Don't get me wrong, it gets the job done, it's functional, but I feel like they could have made it more interesting. Getting these personas feels very gamey. It doesn't feel like a thing in the world, it just feels like a game mechanic. For comparison, I like how in SMT you actually have to talk to demons and negotiate with them. Here, it's super simplified and kinda dull, but whatever, it works. Throughout your journey, you'll collect many different personas. creatures and beings from various cultures and mythologies. While you can obtain some of them through shuffle time, they won't have any extra moves or bonus experience, so they're really not going to be that useful. Your best bet will be going to the Velvet Room and fusing personas together to create new ones. As I explained previously, leveling up a social link allows all your newly fused personas of that social link's arcana to start with big XP boosts, which can allow them to start at higher levels and with more moves than personas from shuffle time. At first, you can fuse 2 personas together, or 3. But as the game goes on, you'll unlock the ability to do more complicated fusions involving more personas. Needless to say, it can start to get a little overwhelming. Looking at the list of possible fusions, you'll see what arcana and starting level each one is. If its starting level is higher than your current level, you can't fuse it yet. When you try and fuse a new persona, you'll see what moves it'll have and how much bonus XP it'll get before you commit to doing the fusion. If the persona becomes a higher level than you are because of the bonus XP, you'll still be able to fuse it. Each persona has a few base moves it will always start with, and a learned set of new moves. But it won't get anything but those moves except from fusing the persona yourself and/or using skill cards. Well, sometimes when a persona levels up, it'll try to change one of its moves, but it's not really worth it. Moves from each persona can be inherited by the resulting fusion, but not every move can be inherited this way. This inheritance is random, so whatever moves your new persona could have might not be what you want. You're going to be spending a ton of time in the Velvet Room fusing stuff, but one big reason why is because of all the time you'll spend backing out of a fusion and redoing it until you finally get the moves you want. Skill cards help a little, but duplicating them can be kind of wonky, so it can be a bit of a pain to get them too. The random skill inheritance really doesn't bother me that much, since this is just how SMT games worked back then, but later games let you pick your skills. Even SMT Nocturne was changed to work that way in the remaster. If you're coming in from later SMT releases, that might throw you off, but you'll get used to it. In a weird way, jumping through hoops to fuse the perfect persona with the perfect moves is pretty satisfying. Fusing new personas never gets old. Leveling up and experimenting to see what kind of stuff you can fuse is fun and engaging. You're not going to be sitting on the same party for the whole game. Grinding to level up will help your characters, but personas gain XP extremely slowly. It's mostly only really worth it to grind a persona if you're trying to learn another one of its moves, and that's really only worth it early on when you don't have many social links or personas with good moves to fuse. You'll be fusing new stuff constantly. Fortunately, there's also the Persona Compendium where you can register all your stuff and resummon them for a fee. It's good that there's so many variables here. Persona 3 seems to only care that you beat the challenges, not how. And with so many options, no 2 playthroughs should be the same. What can I say about this game's story that hasn't already been said and analyzed far deeper than I could ever hope to? Dear viewers, this is the point of no return. Just a heads up, this story is going to get pretty dark at points. Spoilers incoming. Years before the game begins, the Kirijo group were researching into shadows, the Dark Hour, and all that. Stuff goes wrong, and 12 shadows are released. Years later, Shuji Akutsuki leads a special group of students known as the Special Extracurricular Execution Squad, and their goal is to destroy all these shadows, end the existence of the Dark Hour, and get rid of Tartarus. Your character transfers to Gekkokan High and joins SEAS, followed by others throughout the story. You were orphaned many years ago, so you've transferred around a bit and been through some stuff. Mitsuru and Akihiko are older students who have been in SEAS for a while already. Mitsuru is the heir to the Kirijo group and struggles throughout the game with her guilt about their past. Initially, Mitsuru serves as the navigator, but joins as a combatant later on. Akihiko is a boxer who was orphaned as a child and later lost his sister, so he's been obsessed with training ever since because he believes he was too weak to stop the bad things that happened to him. Yukari is a newer member of SEAS whose father died working for the Kirijo group. As a result, she has a lot of resentment for Mitsuru, her father, and even her mother. But she doesn't know the full story. Junpei is a goofball on the surface, but struggles with insecurity about his position in SEAS and his difficulty opening up to people, because he wants to be an unshakable support for everyone else. Fuka is C's second navigator, and she struggles with really low self-esteem throughout the game as she deals with being bullied and developing confidence in herself. Aegis is an anti-shadow weapon, and she starts to struggle with emotions and the meaning of life, as she starts to realize that she's not just a machine, but a living thing, just like any other person. Koromaru is a dog whose master was a monk at the Naganiki Shrine, but has been astray ever since his master died. Ken is a grade schooler who moved in with C's because he's an orphan and had no place to go during summer vacation, and he ends up joining up with them. Finally, Shinjiro is an older student and pretty much Akihiko's only real friend, and he used to be a member of C's but left after an incident where his persona went berserk. But these aren't the only players in this show. A strange boy named Pharos appears throughout the game, warning you about the impending full moon. And while C's wants to annihilate the Dark Hour, they're not the only ones who can use personas. A group of rogue persona users called Strega stands against them. Junpei meets a mysterious girl named Chidori during summer vacation. Eventually he runs his mouth too much, leading Strega to get involved by having her kidnap him during the next full moon. But this ultimately led to her being hospitalized. The other two, Takaya and Jin, continue to try to meddle in their affairs. This comes to a head on the full moon of October 4th. Ken and Shinjiro are nowhere to be found during the mission. As it turns out, 2 years ago, Shinjiro's persona went berserk and killed Ken's mother, leaving Ken a broken, depressed shell with nothing to live for. Ken asks Shinjiro to come back to the place that it happened, so he can get his revenge. What follows is, well, I think it speaks for itself.
Do it. I won't stop you, but let me give you one warning.
Warning?
If you decide to take my life, you'll end up like me. Just remember that.
Is that supposed to change my mind?
Even if all you have now is hatred, one day you'll regret it.
He is correct.
Takaya from Strega interrupts and tries to kill them. In the ensuing chaos, Shinjiro sacrifices himself to save Ken. Shinjiro had no fear of death, but rather he accepted it as an inevitable conclusion and chose to live his life the best he could. And this allows the rest of the cast to take inspiration from him. Akihiko realizes he was so focused on power that he missed what was going on around him, before finding his resolve and continuing on. Akihiko never gave up his will to fight to the end, and he's able to help Ken find his will to live and fight after he had lost his chance at revenge, which was the only thing keeping him going. At the next full moon, C's has a confrontation with Strega, who are promptly defeated and, refusing to accept life without the Dark Hour, jump off the bridge to their deaths. After defeating Strega and the Last Shadow, a celebration is in order. Conspicuous by their absence are Akutsuki and Aegis, but the rest of the gang's all here, including Mitsuru's dad. It's a good time. Or is it? The Dark Hour comes, much to everyone's confusion. Heading to Tartarus, they encounter Akutsuki and Aegis, who is under his control. Turns out Akutsuki was part of the Kirijo group's experiments, which were meant to summon death to destroy the world and rule over humanity. And the 12 Shadows needed to be defeated in order to bring about death's coming. Akutsuki then has Aegis put everyone on crosses to sacrifice them, except for Mitsuru's father. But Aegis can't bring herself to harm C's. She promised to protect you no matter what, and she's not going to stop now. This standoff escalates with Akutsuki and Mitsuru's dad shooting each other. Akutsuki ends up jumping off a ledge to his death, while Mitsuru's father was fatally wounded. This pushes Mitsuru into leading the Kirijo group, and eventually helps her find her resolve to fight. Later that month, Strega breaks Chidori out of the hospital, and they go to Tartarus. After a short fight with Chidori, an encounter ensues, and Junpei ends up taking a bullet for her. She ends up using her persona to save his life, but it comes at the cost of her own. Afterwards, Junpei awakens his inner resolve, and his persona evolves. After that, Strega flees. After these incidents, life goes on. A new student named Ryoji transfers to your school. For some reason, Aegis views him as a threat. One night during the Dark Hour, Aegis finds him and confronts him. As it turns out, Ryoji is the appriser of death. Aegis fought him 10 years ago to try to stop him, but was unable to succeed. Out of desperation, she sealed him away inside of a nearby child. You guessed it, that was you. Trying again, Aegis is effortlessly defeated by Ryoji. Nyx, the goddess of death, will kill everyone and bring about the end of the world at the end of winter, and there's nothing that can be done to prevent this. Ryoji will be her avatar to do so. You have a choice to make on December 31st. Kill him, and the fall still happens, but it's instant, and nobody knows about it. Or you let him live and confront Nyx on the promised day of January 31st. The stage for this final showdown? The top of Tartarus. So I let him live. You know, true endings and all that. In January, Aigis gets a lot of focus as she discovers the meaning of life, what she wants to live for, and all that good stuff. In the lead up to the promised day, C's all resolve to fight Nyx. If they're going to die, they'll die the way they lived, fighting for the world. Since destroying Nyx will erase everyone's memories, they agree to meet up on the school's rooftop on Mitsuru and Akihiko's graduation day if they win. During this last month, the vibe is quite ominous. The apocalypse is impending, the streets are clearing, and many people have begun to worship death itself like a cult. It really does feel like the end of the world, and the whole world's weight is on your shoulders. Eventually, the promised day arrives, January 31st. C's ascends to the top of Tartarus, with Takaya and Jin attempting to stop them. It doesn't work out for them. After disposing of these two goobers, it's time for what this game has been building up to for over 80 hours, killing death through the power of friendship. The death fight's really cool, as Nyx's avatar Ryoji has 14 health bars that represent all the various arcanas, changing his strengths, weaknesses, and moves, and ramping up the difficulty as it continues. This fight took me an ungodly length of time. He's such a damage sponge, even with buffs and debuffs, and I had to use a bunch of rare items to restore my team's SP to keep doing good moves. But eventually, I stood victorious. Or so I thought. Nyx is too powerful for us to defeat, and the fall seems inevitable. After C's collapses, you find yourself in the Velvet Room, where Igor gives you the power of the Universe Arcana, the power of all your social links. With the Universe Arcana, and a little help from your friends, you seal away Nyx. Fast forward to March. Everything seems fine. You can check up on all your various friends to see how they're doing, but you've been absolutely exhausted recently. You even overslept for the graduation. Aigis goes to check up on you, and you two go to the school roof to wait for your friends. Aigis confides in you about finding her meaning in life, and, well, just shut up and watch.
After fighting alongside you and facing the world's end, I finally began to understand what it means to live. Thinking for yourself, not running away, accepting the inevitable. All things eventually come to an end. Every living thing will one day disappear. Only by accepting this can one discover what they truly want, what the meaning of their life will be. I understand now why I was so tormented by my lack of strength. Protecting others became more than just an order I had to obey. I wanted to do it for my own reasons. I realized this once I decided to try and prevent the fall. When I thought I might never see you again, something else became clear to me. What I wanted most. And so, I made up my mind. I decided that I would continue to protect you. I want to be your strength. I know I'm not the only one who can do this, but that's okay. My life will be worth living if it's for this reason. Thank you. You're right. What am I doing? I understand now. So I should be happy.
Hey!
Everyone! I realize now that I have friends as well. You don't have to save the world to find meaning in life. Sometimes, all you need is something simple, like someone to take care of. I'll keep on living no matter what, so that I can protect you. Thank you for everything. You're tired, aren't you? You can close your eyes. I'll always remain here by your side. The others will be here soon. Don't worry. I'll always protect you.
Man, I need a tissue or something. That's beautiful. More than anything, I don't think Persona 3 is really about its literal story. For a lot of it, the story is just character interactions, while Tartarus and Strega are tools for the game's mechanics and a vehicle for its ideas. I think Persona 3 is really truly about its themes and ideas. To live is to change, to try something new, to die. Death is coming, but don't fear it. Live your life and do what you want to do. As Friedrich Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." I feel like I've gone off the deep end here because I just quoted Friedrich Nietzsche in a video game review, but that's where we're at. I asked at the beginning of this epic, is Persona 3 Portable worth it? I admit, I had a lot of problems with the game. Tartarus is a little dull and mostly feels divorced from the story and world. The story is mostly brewing in the background for a lot of the game, and at times, some of its characters seem to be more of a vehicle for the game's ideas rather than real characters. Shinjiro and Strega come to mind. The difficulty of Portable is something of a joke, since they reworked combat from the PS2 versions of Persona 3 without rebalancing or redesigning the fights to accommodate that. The late game can be a dry spell due to NPC schedules and the ridiculously high stat requirements to start some of the social links. Some things might turn a player off because of preference. I'm not crazy about the game having that 2D visual novel presentation, but there's not really anything wrong with it. I prefer the PS2 version's 3D graphics, but since most of Persona 3's storytelling happens through voiceover and text boxes, it really doesn't actually change that much. So I only bring up the visual novel thing now when it's actually relevant. But even with these, Portable tells an emotional and meaningful story about life, death, existence, meaning, all that. Everyone who's interested in video games as an art form for storytelling should check this game out. And the gameplay's a blast too. Exploiting weaknesses, stomping enemy formations, collecting ever cooler monsters, and facing scary bosses is great, even if it's a little too easy. And with both the original male character and the female character, you'll have plenty of content to go around. It took me almost 84 hours to beat the female route, so you'll get your money's worth for sure. Is Persona 3 Portable worth it? Yes. Howdy, gang. It's really late and I've just finished editing this video, but I'm glad you watched it and I thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe, like, share, comment, do all that good stuff. Check out my friends, follow me on X, links in the description.